we've only got half an hour for this panel, so I want to skip the part where people talk about their credits and all that stuff. You can find out about that later on. What's cool about this panel is every single one of these people is here because they did something extraordinary this year. And we don't know who's going to win it, but tonight it doesn't matter. And what I wanted to do is just start out, maybe this is a real softball question, but it's the kind of question you ask the champions. You know, and what's unique about them is all these guys went out, they set out, they did a project, and it was extremely successful. Okay, and they're sitting in the room tonight. And what I want to ask them is, introduce themselves, just their name. You know, we all know they did a real good job writing, and you can find out the credits later on. And what the challenge that they took on when they did the game was, what the biggest obstacle they encountered in the course of doing it was, and what was the moment? Because they all had to have it. It's a really fascinating moment nobody ever talks about. The moment they knew this thing's going to be really good. And if they don't feel that way, they can tell us about the moment they knew it was going to be really bad, and they really don't feel that to be here. And their script was absolutely accidentally submitted to the Guild. But they can tell us that story if they want to. But I just kind of want to hear, just walk through it, and feel free if you have some issue you really want to talk about it. But this is your just moment to bask in. You did something really good. We'll start with Amy. Full disclosure, Amy and I worked on the first Uncharted together. So I'm really prejudiced towards that, and I like to skew the vote. Anyway, we'll start with Amy, and just go on down the line.
What was the first question? I dropped my water. The first question is,
listening. What was... You never did listen to it. Oh, anyway, what was the biggest challenge that you had? What challenge did you undertake doing this? Because just as a side note, what's very interesting about this game is all these nominees, is that all these games had something really hard about them. 3 of them were sequels. And sequels are not easy. Okay? Because you've sort of blown the initial wad of the franchise at the first game, and now you have to find the second wad. And finding the second wad is a tough exercise. Okay? Then we have a game we have a brand new IP with Wet that is, and that's not an easy feat either. You just out of whole cloth say, hey, I'm going to do this game called Wet. It's got a woman running around, and it's not porn. That's a really fascinating challenge, there. And then you have a game that is based on a licensed character. And I've done enough of those in my life to know that is really tough, being Wolverine. Because, you're competing with a movie, and it's a movie game, which is also a curse. And you're competing with a comic book, and it's a character everybody loves and thinks they know better than the writers. So, all these people have had a really tough challenge. Anyway, back to your question. Your question was, what was your biggest challenge? What was the challenge you took on? What was your biggest obstacle? And what was the moment you knew, hey, this is going to work. I'm not going to die and get fired. And, I'm going to be sitting there, up for an award pretty soon.
Still waiting for that. The biggest challenge is always the fact that because I work at Naughty Dog, I'm the creative director, so I'm not an external writer, so I'm on the project from the beginning like a film director might be or a producer might be. And so our biggest challenge is, since we're an employee-based model, everybody who's at the company is sitting there ready to work day one, and there's really no pre-production, right? And so you pretty much have to make decisions really quickly, and then figure out how you're going to live with them so that people can get to work. Otherwise, they're sitting there burning salaries and their morale's dropping. And so it's a really lousy way to write, but it's the way we have to write. The other biggest challenge, of course, is that games are an iterative medium when you're building them. It's not like you do a lot of pre-production, then just go build the thing you planned out. You're basically in production the whole time, and so what you do is you discover as you're going that you suddenly don't have the schedule you thought you had, you can't build the levels you thought you could, you can't afford all the scenes you thought you had, and so you have to creatively constantly rewrite around all of these changes. When I knew it was going to work was probably about a month and a half before we finished, and so it's always, and that's always the way it is. It's an absolute act of faith all the way up to the last minute, and all of a sudden you see all the pieces coming together and realize, oh my God, we actually pulled this off.
Yeah, no, it's a really cool point, and that is that that what Amy's saying is this is not a medium like a movie. Your script is not your gating item. A movie, it's like the script's got to be done, and then we can find a director, and it doesn't work that way. Your script is sometimes chasing the game. you can get phone calls. Oh yeah, we're in beta, and we haven't figured out our story yet, and we're shipping next week. So can you do it so it's me voice? I've had that call. Anyway, go on ahead and just.
Well, I'd come onto the previous Modern Warfare game about halfway through. The design team at Infinity Ward, and a bunch of them are here in the front row tonight. I just want to say hi, guys, because they're the really talented ones. I'm only partially involved. And they had basically already laid out what that game was going to be. They just wanted some outside guidance in terms of how to tell the story. On the second one, on this game, I was with them from the very beginning, and we had story meetings before anything had been started to be designed. And it would seem kind of obvious in retrospect that if you're doing a sequel, you just do a sequel and pick up where you left off on the last one. But at the beginning, this was the real challenge. The first, month of meetings we had, we didn't really want to pick up where we left off because we didn't have anything. So we threw out every idea we could think of. Maybe we go to space, maybe there's aliens, maybe there's zombies, and then finally I think we looked at the previous game and said, well, why don't we just do a sequel to that game like this one is called? And we went back and looked at it, and there was a moment there where I think the inspiration was this great victory at the end of the first game where you're alone and on the bridge, you're the last man standing, you've killed all the bad guys and it's triumphant. We said, well, what if that victory was actually a failure, and afterwards the whole world fell apart, and we decided that we could start from there. And that was the real challenge, was finding that moment. And the moment when I knew we were onto something and it worked was about, I guess it was a few months later when we kicked around worlds we wanted to go to, and one of the things we kept talking about was, let's go to the snow, I love the snow. And I don't know, I got a thing for snow. I live in Los Angeles, never get to see it. And I came in and the guys showed me a board that they'd worked on that was going to be at the beginning, and it was going to start with a guy with ice axes climbing up a frozen waterfall, and it just looked cool as hell. And I said, this is going to work. And they said, you really like it? I said, yeah. Can you kill somebody with one of those ice axes? And they said, not yet. And I said, well, I'm glad I was here. And once we had that ice axes killing people, I was pretty happy.
Anyway, the thing you got to know about Jesse, too, is the product he released and he's talking about has been called the most successful entertainment product in history. Okay, this is there's not some trivial success. This is, it gave Avatar a wedgie. The other thing that's really interesting, the storytelling point of view, is I was talking to a game designer, a good friend of mine, a guy who's, certainly I respect, certainly as a game writer, Chris Metzen, and he sat and described the airport scene like, it would be frame for frame if it was a movie. Talking about, how do you not call this art? I haven't seen something in the movie, and he wouldn't stop talking about it to the point, I had to go out the next day and get the game and all that. It was that's a really extraordinary piece of work at a number of levels. And yeah, thanks for that. Okay.